Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Colin Cameron, president of Profits for Partners and founder of the law firm Profitability Group. I'm delighted to host today's session, AI Agents for Law Firms. The Law Firm Profitability Group is a LinkedIn group for legal professionals focused on law firm performance, operations, and profitability. So this conversation fits very well with what the group is about. Most lawyers now understand AI is changing the profession. The harder question is where to begin, whether the tools are actually ready for legal work, and what guardrails need to be in place before firms put them in practice. So this is what we're going to explore today. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mark Alcazar and John Fitzpatrick from Apex Velocity Catalyst. Mark is a fractional CTO, a former Microsoft Vice President of Engineering, and a founding partner at Apex Velocity Catalyst. John is a fractional CTO, U.S. Navy veteran, and founding partner at Apex Velocity Catalyst. Both of them are bringing hands-on experience because they are not just talking about these tools. They are building and using them in their work every day. So thank you all for being here. Mark, John, welcome.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you for that warm introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today, giving this presentation. So both John and I are going to show you real tools we're using right now. It's not concept slides. These are things you can do today. Some of this is things we're using in our own firm. Some of this we built as demo concepts. I intend to be respectful of everybody's time. So a few places I've trimmed and recorded and sped things up, but everything is real. We're going to make the slides available for all attendees afterwards. So they're, questions, you can try stuff out yourself. And then we're going to walk through a gradual progression of, it's going to get, easy to start with, and then we're going to work our way up to more complex stuff. And then we'll have some questions at the end. Please post your questions in the LinkedIn chat, and we're going to do our best to bring them into our discussion at the end. And we have some folks from my firm helping with that. And with that preamble, I'm going to get started. I wanted to start first with a question that I think frames everything we're going to talk about today. And that question is, what changes when intelligence is cheap? The legal profession has been built on one model for generations. You sell expensive intelligence by the hour. There's your research, drafting, analysis, the client relationship, all this stuff. Your advice, that's what your clients pay you for. But what happens when a significant chunk of that cognitive work can be done by a machine at near zero marginal cost? To be clear, not all of it, not the judgment, not the strategy, not the attending a courtroom, not the client relationship, but the scaffolding, the first draft, the research compilation, the document formatting. And this isn't a prediction. It's already happening unevenly and faster than most firms realize. So let me show you the data. So this is data from a study that Anthropic, the makers of Claude, put together. They commissioned somebody to do this study. And of course, they have their own interest at heart. So take that with a grain of salt. But it's making the point it's trying to visualize the extent of possible theoretical legal adoption or AI adoption and the actual adoption across different knowledge-based industries. So the blue area shows what AI could potentially do, and the red is how it's adopted today. So you'll see, business and finance and computer, my own field, computer and math. There's been wide adoption, legal and some other knowledge professions. There's more adoption that could happen, but it's not fully to the edge of the blue chart as yet. I can speak firsthand from my own field, software engineering. When I first saw AI come on the field, I was still working at Microsoft, and I was like, wow, this is going to change software dramatically, maybe in 10 to 15 years. It took 1 year. It actually took less than a year. It's been breathtaking. And the way you write software today is completely different from how it was when I started in the profession, and it changed within 9 months. I mean, 6 months ago, people were still debating like, oh, is it good enough? It's a done deal. It's good. It's very good. It's very efficient. There's no other way to do it. The job I was hired to do at Microsoft 29 years ago, that role still exists, but the way in which it's done is very different. And I believe legal is the next firm like that to transform, because I think it has a lot of characteristics and similarities. And we'll go through that today. You can see the gap between the red and the blue on legal, you could see it as a challenge and both an opportunity. To be clear, I don't think this is about jobs disappearing. There's a projection from BLS that shows that legal will still have employment growth throughout the 2034. I really believe it's about capturing efficiency gains and seeing what does and doesn't work. So I wanted to get practical. I wanted to show a demo of something that took a short amount of time to build. This is to show the, when intelligence gets cheap. So all firms have some form of new matter intake. You have a new potential client and you need to record those details and get back to them. And I have this own problem in my own business. Maybe you have admin who takes the details. Maybe it's entered in a spreadsheet. Maybe it's in a CRM tool. I'll show you a tool that I was able to build with Claude in minutes. The point is not about the tool. This was done with no developer, no IT tool. It's a simple matter intake form. You record the details and then it populates it on a web page, and then you can download a spreadsheet. The point isn't about the specific form. The point is the barrier to building these tools has dropped dramatically. A year ago, building a tool like this would have been a vendor conversation and probably, a 5-figure programming contract. That's all changed. So this is a demo. It's just posting. It's generating the form right now. And you'll see it's built a web page. This is running in the web page. I speeded this up in, respect of everybody's time. And then you submit a take and you get a spreadsheet to download with the details. You probably wouldn't do it this way exactly, but the point I'm trying to make, building these tools is so much easier than it was in the past. So now I want to share a technique that I use all the time myself. Many of you might have used AI before yourselves. Maybe you start off with using it as a search engine, and then you progressively learn new techniques. This is a technique I used myself. So I'll start with a sample prompt where maybe you just ask your AI tool, draft a legal engagement for a new client. And you'd get output that is very generic, and it's something that none of you would go share with a real client. But I wanted to show how you can improve the output very quickly. And this is a technique you can use in general for all the time. So there are two things I do. One is I give more specific context. So you'll see some of the improved prompt down here. You give more details and then the AI gets better. So draft a legal engagement letter for a new litigation client in Washington State, and then you give more details. So that's thing one. Thing two is to tell the AI to create a rubric, a score, to assess itself. I give some details on how to assess itself, and then tell it to iterate until it's at least a 95 out of 100. Now, I tried to save space on the slide, so I have the full prompt in the deck at the end, which we'll share, so you can look at it yourself. You can fine-tune the rubric and the categories. You can be very precise and use a specific category for your firm and standardize across your firm, or you can let the AI figure it out, which is what I sort of did here. I gave it some general categories. I do that all the time. Just create a rubric, and what you get is pretty good. Let's see what that demo looks like. So this is me pasting in the actual content. It starts building the content. So it runs a score against itself. So I'm just going to pause the video quickly. You'll see that it scored itself and it gave itself an 86 out of 100. And now it's going to iterate again to make that better. And I don't know if OpenAI and Anthropic like this technique because I think it burns more, it increases their costs. Hey, it's a great technique. I use this all the time myself. It improves itself and it iterates. And then it says, hey, I got a 96 out of 100. Here's all the criteria. Here's a score. You can also construct a prompt to say, hey, I want to make this better. Really useful technique, something you can do today. I really encourage you to go and try and play with it. Nope. So now I'm going to transition to talking about agents. So what are agents? What I've been showing so far, I would call as general purpose AI. And that is, you're using, a chat agent and you're using it for general tasks and it's not really educated. Agents are purpose built for a special workflow. You'll see an example of an NDA workflow coming up. The more you train your agents and the more specialized you make them, the better output you get because they get to focus on a thing and you get to create a general purpose thing with specific instructions and specific mechanisms for achieving a job. You really need both. I think it depends on what your firm needs and what you need yourself and how much agents you use in practice. I'm going to start with a demo of my chief of staff agent that I built for myself using an AI harness called OpenClaw. These are some of the things my agent does for me. It's key to me running my business. It does reminders for myself, contact management, to-dos. It does a daily email digest. And a year ago, I would have said, the cost of custom software means that it's not really efficient for you to go build a tool like this yourself. But that has all changed. And I think now, where in the past I would say, oh, you'd be crazy to go build your own CRM system. I think now it's the other way. Like I would say you're crazy not to build your own CRM system. So let me just pull that up. So first, I'm going to show the dashboard. This is a dashboard that I built for my own practice. It's backed by a database. It's available on the internet. It's all secured. These are my things I have to do today. These are my weekly goals. I'll flip over here. You'll see some of my contacts. You'll see Colin's name there. For whatever reason, I call reminders pokes, and you'll see one of these in action. And more than just a database, I also have my actual agent, which is able to work with me throughout the day. So this is my agent running in Telegram. I gave her the name of Sloane because you can customize this a little bit. This is the newsletter digest. I think all of us are overwhelmed with information myself. There's a mix of useful stuff and there's a bunch of like, oh, you should look at this. And then it was like, hey, this is noise. And my agent helps me with that. It's, hey, you should read this article. You should take a look at this. Oh, this is noise. You can ignore it. It's really, really useful. It gives me a quick recap of my goals. Yeah, I could do it myself, but also strangely, she can help me keep myself more. And then I have it open all the time. It's an ongoing chat. When I want to go do something, I say, hey, go do this. To poke. This is my reminder to tell everybody and to share this with everybody in the event. And let me transition back to the other demo. So next demo I'll show is using Claude Cowork, which is another part of Claude itself. Cowork is a tool where it's a little bit different. It allows you to directly edit a whole bunch of documents and, edit a whole bunch of, take direct action on all the desktop apps you use every day. So the situation is this, the hypothetical is this. A junior associate has been asked to draft a contract document, a settlement agreement, and a senior attorney has reviewed it. And there's a meeting where they met and they went over what's wrong with the settlement. And, she gave some instructions and all this sort of stuff. I'm sure you've been in meetings like this. I've been in many in my life. You're going through, a document and you're weighing in on things you have to go do. So in the quote unquote old days, I would go through, remember or jot down the things I had to go do. And then I'd go spend a bunch of time making those changes. Maybe today you're using a transcription. Most of us are today in a meeting and you're getting those notes, and AI does a good job of giving you the action items. So that's one step of savings. But what if you could just have the whole thing do it for you? So let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is, first I'm going to pull up the actual meeting notes. So these are the meeting notes here. As always, this is just me opening it in a separate editor. So it's a mix of useful feedback and, futzing with a microphone, and I have a sick kid and all this kind of stuff. So you don't have to clean this up. Let's go to Claude Cowork. So this is Claude Cowork. Here I've dragged in two files. I've dragged in the actual docx, which is the draft agreement. And then I've added the notes. And I tell Claude, hey, I want you to read the transcript. I want you to extract all the changes, share the changes that you see, and then apply them to the settlement agreement. And we're off to the races. It'll take a minute or two, but you'll see it work it out as it goes along. You'll see, hey, it listed out all the changes. So this is its analysis of the notes. And now it's drafting the actual revised draft. Up here, it gives you a little progress indication. And then it's done. It's just confirming what it did and a note about what she said about the date. And I can pull up the revised settlement agreement. Hey, presto, I have a completely new form with all my edits done for me. And, I think This is a pretty typical use case for many of us. So now I'll go on to my next demo. So now I'm going to hand off to my colleague, John, who's going to give you a demo of an AI-assisted NDA workflow. And I'll transition to you, John.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So what I have built at the request of Colin and Mark was a sample app that kind of shows a typical workflow for many legal firms for taking care of NDAs. So what we have here is something that I built. It's taking a week or two to put this together with a few revisions. It does have some rough edges. And since I'm a tech guy, I like to start in admin settings and stuff. And I want to point out one thing here. I have this tied into using OpenRouter, which gives us access to pretty much all of the frontier models. And I do have it in demo mode right now. So if I turn it off, like I just did, now it's actually going to use real models for everything. We'll leave it in demo mode for right now because it speeds up parts of this that we want to do. For the drafting of the NDA that I'll do, I'm going to use Opus instead of Sonnet. I'm using Sonnet for most of the others. And these can all be picked from dynamically from OpenRouter. So there's hundreds of different things there. There is one part of the demo as well for the review workflow where there's a lot of different uses of things. And on the multi-agent consensus, one of the big things, and I'm sure people here have heard about hallucination or experienced hallucination with AI agents. One of the best ways of alleviating the problems from that is using different models to kind of do the same thing and then merging that together. So for the multi-agent consensus, I'm going to use Opus, use some GPT 5.4 and some Grok, and Sonnet for the confidence scoring. You can set up the agents for all of the different tasks that are built into this individually, and then use that. So a few things here with the dashboard. This is just basically a list of all NDAs for a firm who's using this. We can see what status they're in, filter it by different status. So there's 2 that are in the draft status or 4 in review status. Search works quite well. It's all live and tied into a Supabase database, but we can keep track of which ones are signed and view those later or do other things. Let's go ahead and just get started with the new NDA. So open this up, it'll bring in a basic form. So let's just copy in some details here. We'll put in a purpose here. Next, we'll make this a standard 12-month long, or we can do high sensitivity or whatever. We'll just do standard for right now. We're able to add in contacts at this stage. But for now, I'm not going to fill this in because I do still have one little bug in the system that if I put these in, it's not going to generate the NDA right away, but we can put these in and have it so that it's who the signer is for the contract or who the reviewers are. If it's the same person, just check it. You only have to put in one. Let's go back and create NDA. So it's now creating the intake session. This is using Opus to generate the model or generate the NDA, generated the draft. Done momentarily. All right, NDA created successfully. So let's come down here and let's view the NDA. So we come in, we get a basic panel that shows some of the metadata around it. Over on the left-hand side, we can do a full screen preview. So this is a basic structured NDA coming from Opus, standard sections and stuff, including a signature section. This is all done in Markdown. Preview that here, and it's also able to be exported directly into a Word document. That works. It's just exports it to a good-looking Word document. What else? So I'm going to click the run review because this will take a little bit here. And while we're doing that, let's jump into the review workflow. So when we're doing a review workflow, there's a lot of different things that needs to happen. So there's document analysis steps that need to happen, legal review stages that need to happen, risk assessments, multi-agent consensus of where things come in, cross-referencing the validation, and kind of a final synthesis of everything together. Demo mode makes this go faster. This would take about 10 minutes if I was using frontier models for a lot of the stuff that's here. So kind of sped it up, but this actually all runs and works live. Details in here for the demo mode are not too detailed, but this is where we'd be able to come in and look at what the findings are, what the response is from each of these different steps as well as this. So the review should be done momentarily. Well, I'm going to jump over to a different one that already hit this stage to show what that looks like. So here's one. And after the review comes back, basically this reviews all the different sections, comes back with overall risk is high on this one that we were looking at. If we look at like the terms and termination, what it does, checklist area, terms of survival. So original NDA text, here's some issues that found with it, suggested fixes with it. And then we're actually able to come in and edit the recommendation here as well. So if there's additional stuff that we want to change there, we can do that, apply edit, and that gets applied into the text. When it's ready for sending to parties for review, you can do send for negotiation. And then from the email addresses that would have gotten put in at the beginning, you can just send these out. It gets sent via email to the reviewers and comes back. Now, down here, we have negotiation versions. There's one down here. As we get responses back from the parties involved with this, we get those different versions down here. And I haven't built it yet, but one of the parts in the plan is to add in a red line capability. So we can actually do a difference between the two, see comparisons, see the responses, see what people have said about those, and be able to work back and forth to get the consensus or agreement on the overall NDA. Once we're done with this stage, we can mark the negotiation complete, and then it goes for an internal review and approval stage with someone at our company. So we get to here, say approve, and we track who approved it, when it got approved. And from here, then we can send for signature. So when that happens, the emails would go out to the signing parties for the signature. And in this stage, this is where we would be tying into something like a DocuSign API or an Adobe Acrobat API to use their signing capabilities. We can also build it internal if we want to. That's not too bad of a thing these days with a lot of the tools that are out there. We can also use existing services like those. Sign now, and that's basically the workflow. So go from signed to getting it, or signing stage to signature pending to signed.
Okay, so move on to the next topic. So I saw some of the questions in the chat where, folks were asking about, okay, this all looks good, but what about governance? What about hallucination? All these things. So it is something you definitely have to think about. I think I like to frame this with there's 3 questions you have to ask before you deploy AI. First of all, you have to decide what AI can and can't do. So you saw my agent. She has access to my email. I have a dedicated account for her, but she could theoretically send email, but I have very explicit instructions. You're not to send email. I just am not comfortable with that. And I think I should write the email myself. Maybe AI drafts it, particularly on client communication. Very nervous, and I define that boundary and I explicitly enforce it. And I have guardrails in place to ensure that happens. So that's something that you need to think about very intentionally within your firm. Maybe you have some practices already, but it's definitely something you have to think about. The next one is checking output before it reaches a client. This is very important. There's been horror stories where AI has fabricated stuff in front of a federal court. Now, I think one of the things is they're trained to produce output. So when you give them more data and more context, the hallucination is when they're making stuff up. You can give them more detailed information and then you get better output, like you saw in that earlier demo. And there are a bunch of techniques you can put in place to guard against things going wrong and, having guardrails. And this is one of the things our firm in particular has put a lot of thought into, and there's a lot of things you can go do. But high level, there's some things you can do around this. You can have an agent review another agent. And they do a really good job at this. It sounded silly to me when I first heard about it. You tell and build another agent to check the output of another one. And the other agent says, you must do this. And there's a back and forth and you get much better output. Another one is using structured checklists. Checklists have been a way that mission critical stuff are validated against. So we've done this for decades. This is how pilots fly planes. This is how rockets go to the moon. And we go through a structured checklist. And you can have your agent go through a structured checklist. It's very good at this. You put a checklist in place. You asked it to validate all these things itself. You asked it to create a written log of each step in the checklist. Meta did a study for code review, again, software engineering, but the agent quality of code review improved by 93% just by using a checklist. And I use this myself for my own software development. And then the other technique is having a constrained scope, right? You decide where do you have humans in the loop and what's appropriate for AI to do. So you might have the AI draft. Maybe it doesn't send a thing. Maybe you have it come from your personal mail, but maybe you have it track the follow-up and, monitoring, NDA signing or your process. And then the third one, which I know Carla brought up in the chat, where does your client data go? You need to put some thought in here and you need to think clearly about where the data goes and what controls you have in place and what's appropriate for your use case. Now, the consumer version of ChatGPT and Claude, they're using your data to train unless you don't say anything. The teams in enterprise version, they have more control. I have a detailed slide on this in the backup. You can have a zero data retention policy. It gets uploaded to the chat, to their server, but you can say zero data retention, and you can specify, I don't want you to train on any of my data. And then if you really want, there are options where you could run the model yourself in the cloud. And then increasingly, you can actually start using local hardware. Both John and I are running a workstation from NVIDIA. It would not have been possible a year ago. Now it's amazing, and it's very doable. And within the cost it's expensive, but not crazy expensive. It's certainly something a mid-sized firm could consider looking at. So there's lots of options available here. John in particular, really good and understands data governance really well. There's a lot of options and things you can do here. So moving on, I wanted to walk through a hypothetical example of AI being deployed in practice, because I think a lot of people see all the capabilities. They say, wow, I understand. I see what it could go do, but where do I go start? I keep getting a form of this question from clients. Where do I go start? I don't even know where to go start. So I'm going to give you a framework for how I think about it. So this is a organizational chart for a hypothetical mid-sized law firm. You have a managing partner at the top. You have different groups within the firm. There's a series of practice groups. There's finance and billing. There's admin and intake. And if you look at within the practice group, there's a senior attorney, their junior associates, their paralegals. The gray boxes are defining the work that they do. And the word I like to use is drag. Every role has drag. There's something in your job that you're not a fan of. You have to do it. It's critical for your business, but you don't necessarily enjoy it. And I call it drag. You may call it toil. There are different words for it. For myself, I love writing code. I love thinking strategically and writing for clients. I don't like the stuff around, client management, reach out, creating a, draft contract for clients. It's not a thing I enjoy. So I try and automate as much of it as I can. And that's a great way to start. So what I tell people is think about your organizational and your structure. Start thinking about what is the work there. So this is a framework for how you go figure this out. Look across the organization and start thinking about what is the work people don't want to do. What's repetitive? What's error prone? What could be automated? A good question is, what are the things you wish you didn't have to do and you could just offload to someone else? And most of you and most of us have a list. Then you start by what I call looking at leverage. So there are two aspects of leverage. One is either the hourly rate or the potential, profit loss you're losing. And then there's a feasibility of automation. So you might have a $500 an hour partner who's doing 5 hours a week on some administrative thing. If you could you could save those, 5 hours, that's $2,500 of revenue for a week, multiplied out about all the partners in the firm. And, you can all do the math. You figure out what those potential cost savings are, and you figure out how feasible it is to automate their job. Or that part of their work. Sorry, not their job. That part of the work. You might have a bunch of $70 an hour paralegals who are doing some administrative thing that could be automated, 10 hours a week. You do that math. And then you figure out what are all the things that you could potentially automate and what are the highest impact that you should consider doing. The final step, start with one thing. You don't need to transform your entire firm and practice all at once. Pick a thing that has the highest chance of succeeding and it's high impact based on what I talked about, and start with that. And based on that, you'll have some learnings and it will likely succeed. And then you can go from there and figure out what's next. I think it's really important to take an incremental approach and harness value over time. And this is what a firm like that would look like after the transformation. Right? So you can imagine we have the same structure, the same people, but now we've reduced the drag because the yellow boxes, we've introduced agents who are going to take on some of the gray box work, right? So finance and billing now has an AI billing reconciliation agent. Junior associates have an AI drafting assistant, somewhat like what John showed you. Paralegals now have a formatting automation, and there's an AI review agent for senior attorneys. And this is the AI augmented workforce transformed. The goal is leverage. The goal is more output, same team in place, but now more is getting done and more profitability. And with that, I wanted to lead with next steps before we close with questions. So John and I have tried to give you some useful things you could go play with yourself. I mentioned we'll share the deck with everybody who's attended. In the deck itself, there's, the actual prompts I use. You can go play with it yourself. You can try it out. There's some more advanced techniques I also have you could go play with. Try it. I really believe in learning by doing. If you're only just nibble the edges on using Claude and Anthropic, there's a lot more you can go try. Then try and, think about what are the things your team hates? What are the things where AI could create immediate value? And just start thinking like, oh, I wish I could offload this. Because the tools can do a lot. And, the more and more you discover it, I have not found a use case that I was like, oh, wow, it can't do that. There's some gaps, but it can do a lot. Then, so take a look at the bonus materials in the deck. I think there's an extra video or two. And I really believe, in closing before we go to questions, this is real. This is happening. And the firms that figure this out in the next 12 to 18 months will have structural advantages for a decade. And with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Colin for questions. Just, happy to connect on LinkedIn. I connected with many of you already, but happy to connect. Also connect with John and Colin. Our firm is here. If you want to discuss more, I love chatting about AI and I love helping people use it effectively. So always happy to chat. Just reach out. And with that, Colin will field some questions for us from the chat.
Excellent presentation, Mark and John. So excited about, you mentioned profitability. The ramifications for profitability to me seem endless. I did want to say some of the examples, we've looked at both substantive legal examples as well as, I'll call it the non-billable types of functions that are done and potentially be done by agents. And I think for many firms, it's a bit of a hang up. Oh, we're concerned about, using this for legal substantive work, but you can do so many things on the non-billable side, the operational side. And as we talked about conflict checks, I think there was questions about that and, how you bring in clients and all of those non-billable functions that you could start with first. And as Mark says, focus on one area. Maybe that's, your intake process, or that's, your conflict checks, whatever it might be, and try automating and focusing on those areas. In the chat, I also noticed there was a question about how do you define how the score is calculated? You may have touched on that a little bit, but for some, to me, it was quite exciting, and I've tried this myself, where you can kind of iterate through, say, a document or some writing that you're doing, and look at, have the rubric, as you say, you create the rubric, and it goes through and it helps you to improve your document or meet specific criteria. If you could, so I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Just explain that a little bit further.
Great question. So I'll see if I can pull up the actual slide. Oh, sorry, short version. I posted this in the chat. So this is the actual complete score the complete prompt that I used. So create a scoring rubric with these categories: completeness of required disclosure under Washington, clarity of fee, now you can define the rubric yourself on the categories. You can go as far as you could create the rubric yourself, very precise. Hey, 20 points for this, 20 points for this. Like, you can do that yourself. You can standardize across your firm. I have really good luck with just saying, create a rubric to score yourself. That works magic most of the time. And then I think another point is, you don't have to be polite with what you get back from the LLM. You can be ruthless, because you can say, sometimes I asked it for this technique and I get something back, and I look at it and I review it and it's like, no, this is bad, and here's why. You gave yourself a 95, but I would give you a 60, and here's why. And then the rubric gets better. You tell it, it improves, and you iterate again, and you get much better output. All of those are valid techniques.
The second question that comes to mind is during the NDA process that you showed, where do the approvals happen? Can they happen all along, and make sure there's I suppose a human in the loop, if you will?
Absolutely. That's something that, however the firm wants to do it, and every firm, I'm sure, does it a little bit different. We can build approvals into wherever they're needed. They can be done via mobile app. They could be done via a Teams app. They could be done via email, or lots of different ways that we could track those. Just specify whatever requirement is that you want to use. We can build that.
Excellent. Excellent. You touched on this a little bit, and I think there was, again, for many lawyers, there's concerns about using agents, data confidentiality, security, etc. Can you just tell us a little bit more about, how you can improve security with these systems, and maybe also the differences again between the consumer versions of the LLMs versus the team and the enterprise versions as it relates to AI agents?
Yeah, sure. So, one thing I'll say is, first of all, we all are familiar with the consumer version, which uploads everything and they use for training unless you tell it not to. However, there's more controls that are available on the Teams and Enterprises plan. So I put some information here in this slide deck. So I think there are differences between the vendors. I won't get into that, but you can specify zero data retention whatsoever, meaning they're not going to hold on to your data at all. You're just going to upload it once, and you can specify you're not to use this for training at all. OpenAI have also, you can set custom retention policies. All of those should make you compliant with those recommendations. And then finally, you can run the models yourself. You can set up your own local hardware. I would have said that would be crazy a while ago. Both John and I are running NVIDIA workstation. It's called a Spark. It's about $5,000, but you can run it and you can chain four of them together and you have complete control of the data. The models that you can run are very powerful. And I think for many use cases, you'd have to depend on what you're doing it yourself. For many use cases, it likely is good enough. And you can also put some thought into how you use the models. That's definitely a thing because there's now a wide range of models. Maybe you have the cheaper model, do something that is more, less client sensitive. Maybe some clients, you're not as worried. Maybe there's this client, it's so important. And you're going to, put it on your own server and have your own data governance. So there are a lot of options, and there's a way of, definitely handling this and being compliant.
I would like to jump in on that answer too, if you don't mind, Colin.
Sure.
Excellent.
We're able to run a lot of the local models, as Mark was just saying. As of about 10 days ago, Google released Gemma 4, which is now my favorite local model. But that's as of the last 10 days. Models are changing so fast. Capabilities are changing so fast that we're on a day to week basis of things changing now, not months and years like we were before. So everything I showed during the NDA demo next week will probably be outdated. It's things are moving that fast with things. I was using Open Router there because it's a nice way to get access to a lot of the different models. Those are running in the cloud that's provided and has different things that are accessible there. But for any use case that we have, we can use enterprise grade cloud platforms. So Azure has their OpenAI. They have their AI Studio. We can use the enterprise level stuff there. We can run it in-house on local hardware. We can run it in AWS or other cloud providers that provide stuff, or you can just use the standard Frontier One models that are provided by Anthropic and use their Teams plans and stuff like that. Things are changing all the time. We're keeping abreast of those changes and looking at stuff, but that's basically for how we control the models. One additional thing, though, that we definitely need to talk about, and that's the AI governance. And that's really where Apex Velocity Catalyst, where our foundation is that's our area of expertise is AI governance. And that's how do you control your AI models? How do you ensure that you're getting good answers? How do you ensure that not only are they providing those, but there's no attacks happening, there's no injections happening from prompts that might be invisible or other skills that are injecting things. So that's an area that I think that we should definitely, like anyone who's interested in that should reach out to us. We can talk a lot more about that. But that AI governance stuff is an area where we're kind of experts in that area.
Yeah, fantastic, John. Fantastic presentation, Mark and John. And so if anyone has further questions, they can just pass those on. You see the information here, contact information to get a hold of Mark or John or myself if you have any questions. And again, thank you so much for excellent presentation. Any final thoughts, Mark or John?
No, big thank you to the Law Profitability Group. And thank you for hosting us, Colin. Thank you for the opportunity. And making AI accessible for more folks is a passion of all for myself and John in particular. And all of us in our firm. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.